Ebony Love from Lovebook Studios, and today we're going to talk about the mystery of the partial seam. Now, I know you're probably thinking, what the heck is that? And how am I going to make a block? But what's great about the partial seam is it really opens up the types of blocks that you can make, and you can start working with more complex blocks using a very simple technique. The block that we're working with today is a modified rail fence with a center block, and this block starts with strip sets. So I'm going to cut some strip sets here, and the way that I like to cut strip sets is first make sure that the seams are pressed open so that you can distribute the bulk of the seam. And then I like to lay my strip sets together so that the seam allowances are alternating, so that also distributes the bulk when I'm cutting. The other nice thing about cutting these strip sets is if you have a rotating mat, you're able to square up the edge and also cut your strip sets accordingly. So right now, I'm just going to take the selvages off of this strip sets. It has a nice safety feature where it just uses pressure to cut. It's so great. All right, so I've squared up that edge, and now I'm just going to rotate this around, and I just picked up the bulk of the strip set so that I didn't disturb it. And I'm going to cut these pieces the length of the log that I need. So that is, I have to move this over a little bit to cut this. Okay, so when you are doing this partial seam construction, it's really, I'm not talking about measurements here, you're really just cutting whatever it is that you need to work with the block that you are using. So I really want to focus on the seam itself, but these are the logs that I'm working with, and I have several set up here. So I wanted to show you how this block goes together. So this block starts with a center square, and then what you're doing is you're taking the logs and placing them around the square. So this one, for example, let's get the right center in there. So this one starts with this log on the left-hand side, followed by the log on the bottom, and then a corresponding log on the right, and then finally the matching log at the top. So as you can see, this would be really challenging to put together because somewhere, because of the way these seams are nested, how do I get this all together? That's the magic of the partial seam. So to do this partial seam, what I need to do is pick one of the logs to start with. So I'm going to start with this log here on the right. And so we'll start working from this log. And so what you want to do is just place these right sides together, and you're going to match up the upper seam here. And to do the partial seam, what I mean is that you're going to stitch from the top of this to about 1.5 inches from the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this point with a pin, and that's going to tell me where to stop stitching. I have the machine set up for a 1/4 inch stitch. I'm using a regular piecing weight thread and a corresponding needle. The machine is set up to stitch the 1/4 inch, and the foot that I'm using has a flanged guide on the edge. I just prefer stitching with a flanged edge. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start stitching, and just remember, when you get to the pin, you're going to stop sewing. Okay, so we're coming right up to the pin, and I'm going to stop sewing here and cut my threads. All right, so what you would want to do then is take this to your pressing board and press the seam open. So you can see all of what I'm doing here is trying to distribute the bulk of the seams. I do have a block started over here. So the way that this block goes next is, now that you have this unit stitched, and I'm just going to peel away the layers here like an onion here, now that you have this stitched, the magic of this partial seam, so here is the partial seam here, and we're not going to worry about this part anymore. Now that we have this seam fully stitched, we can now take the next log and lay it right sides together and stitch that unit as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Back here at the machine, again, I'm still set up for a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just gonna stitch right down the edge there using my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once I get to the end, here, I'm actually, cutting after each one. But once you get going, you can really do chain piecing on this and get all of your block finished, or all of your blocks finished quickly. So with that seam stitched, and again, I have pretended to press and press the seams open here. So that's the second log. Your third log goes on the exact same way. So once you get that third log stitched, and we'll just pretend that I have stitched that already here, because I really want you to see how to get to the end of this partial seam. So your last log, what's going to happen here is that you're dealing with this partial seam. So when you are stitching this right sides together, that's why you left that 1.5 inches, because you want to give yourself room to be able to lay this out and really get to the inside of this. And if you didn't give yourself enough room to finish this, that's okay. What you can do is you can use a little seam ripper to take out some of the stitches, or you can just kind of move this piece out of the way so that you can get to this. So we're going to take this piece to the machine, and you're going to stitch the last log on. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, now we are cooking. This block is coming together so quickly, and I think that once you get the hang of this, you will start to see how using this partial seam construction technique really can open up a world of blocks to you. So my final step is to connect the last log to the pieces that I have already stitched. And so you can see that I have this seam just kind of hanging open. And so what you'll want to do is flip over the top of the unit and make those edges match. And so we're going to pick up sewing. You can see here, this is where I left off with my sewing. So we're going to pick up right from that spot and then stitch all the way to the edge. Let's go ahead and finish that up. So as you align this under your machine, you can use the hand wheel to just turn this into the fabric and watch where your needle is going to go in. And then I'm lining up this final unit straight, and we're going to go ahead and stitch that all the way through. Fantastic. We are almost done. Your last step to finish up this block is to go ahead and press that last seam open. And at the end, you get this beautiful block with the twist on the inside using that partial seam construction technique. I hope you go ahead and use that on your next project.